Booktube, these are 5 fantasy series that I read to fall back in love with the genre, plus a bonus recommendation at the end. So if you're fantasy curious, beginner fantasy reader, or even a long-time fantasy reader in need of some new recommendations, this is my fantasy series starter pack. So let's not stand on ceremony. Let's get to the books. Smack that like button, pound that subscribe button, and let's pitter patter, get at her. First up is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if this is super beginner level because this series does have some chunk to it, but it's a series that I read early on when I was getting back into the genre. So I'm going to include it anyway. Plus, it was my introduction to Brandon Sanderson, who is one of the most popular, actually the most popular fantasy author in the game. Now, I don't love his stuff as much as others. I like the grittier stuff, but I'm not a hater, and I really enjoyed the bananas out of this series. Sanderson's website describes this as Ocean's 11 meets Lord of the Rings, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, with a smattering of My Fair Lady, which is a lot of things mashed together, but it's pretty accurate. And Sanderson makes all of these ingredients in play work off of each other really well. The initial concept of the world and magic systems is easy to grasp at first, and then it adds layers and depth throughout the series to make it more complex. The setup for the world is the bad guy won, and what you've got is a dystopian realm where the sun is being blocked out by ash, and really there's ash everywhere. And at night there's this supernatural mist that coats everything. There are 3 different magic systems, but the main one you explore early on is the idea of allomancy, which is where certain characters known as mistings can ingest different types of metal and burn them to create different effects. And each metal works off of a different metal to create the opposite effect. So for instance, if you burn steel, you can push on nearby metals. One example of this is a type of misting known as a coin shot. So imagine somebody shooting coins like missiles at your head. Now the reverse of this is burning iron. So I could pull a metal object to me in a direct line. Those are the 2 base level metals used, and it's powerful enough that you can skip through the air just by using those 2 together, which in my opinion is a really cool visual and idea overall, especially when you create combat scenes that incorporate them. And that's where the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon part comes in. So you've got this group of allomancers that are attempting to overthrow this dystopian empire, and boom, there's your overall premise. And it's got a heist feel to it, which I love. Book 1 of this series of Mistborn is titled The Final Empire. I know it says Mistborn on there, but trust me, it's the Final Empire. Book 2 is The Well of Ascension, and Book 3 is the dramatic conclusion, The Hero of Ages. My favorite of these was Book 1. Book 2 kind of dragged for me a bit as we really unpacked all the political intrigue and expanded on the world building and magic systems. And even the first half of Book 3, The Hero of Ages, can be a bit of a challenge. But the thing that Sanderson is known for is his Sander Lanch, where at the end of these books, it's all gas, no brakes, and you typically get an incredibly satisfying conclusion. And he pulls this off really well in The Hero of Ages. I mean, the ending is bonkers, jaw-dropping crazy. It's so ambitious and well executed. He nailed it. No notes. And by the way, get these additions. The flop. This is the best book flop I've ever seen. This flop could stop wars. It's amazing. Next, we have Shades of Magic by VE SCHWAB. You've got Book 1, A Darker Shade of Magic. Book 2, A Gathering of Shadows. And Book 3, A Conjuring of Light. Now that completes the initial trilogy, and there's currently a follow-up series happening with The Fragile Threads of Power. The Fragile Threads of Power is incredible. Now, the concept of this is very straightforward and honestly really cool. There are 4 Londons, and they all have a different relationship to magic. You've got Red London, which you still have a good deal of magic in its world. You've got White London, which is being starved out and has very little magic, and their people think it's a thing to be controlled and conquered, magic, that is. Grey London is without magic. It's a forgotten thing, essentially. And then Black London, which is in ruin. It's a place that magic destroyed. There's no life there and hasn't been for hundreds of years. And it's completely sealed off from the rest of the Londons. This is all explained very early on, so it's easy to understand and get a hold on. And the same thing goes for the magic system. For instance, the mechanic of how the doors between these worlds work is explained as we learn about the Antari, who are a rare breed that are able to wield elemental magic and travel from world to world. The polar opposite in terms of pacing from Shades of Magic is the Farseer trilogy from Robin Hobb, which exists in the massive realm of the Elderlings world of books. This is for people who prefer character-driven, slow burns, and I want to make that really clear. I have recommended this series before and have always mentioned that it's a slow burn, and people still come back to me with comments like, when does it pick up? If you have to ask that at any point, this probably isn't for you. I, for one, need my characters to sing, and I will eat some drawn out pacing if I get the feeling that I'm living in these characters' heads. And that's what I got with Farseer. You start with Assassin's Apprentice, which is the shortest book in the entire realm of the Elderlings world. It's quite a trick by HOBB to do that to us. So you don't need to make a massive time investment for the heat check. I really have to replace this edition, by the way, so it can match the others. These are gorgeous. This is like, he looks like the Hobbit. In this, you follow our main character, Fitz, I guess, who's pictured here. He's aged 6. He's an illegitimate son to a prince and heir to the throne, and he's thrust into this dangerous life of power politics at the court, all while struggling to understand who he is and the abilities that he has. I won't go too much further into that because I don't want to spoil anything beyond what you can gather from the title, but Fitz is the character whose head you're in, which can be frustrating because he's young, he's human, he makes mistakes, he might be a little stupid, I don't know, but that's part of growing up, and you grow up with him, and it's such a rewarding experience. And as a side note, I'm a sucker for an animal companion, and this has one of the best animal companions in the genre. After that, you go on to book 2, Royal Assassin, which is one of my favorite fantasy books. There's no book 2 syndrome with this puppy. It bangs. And then you get to the final book, book 3, which is Assassin. Why am I having so much trouble? Why did I hold it like that? Which is Assassin's Quest. This is book 3, Assassin's Quest. So again, if you like character-driven slow burns, this is the one. Next, you've got Bloodsworn. This is a Viking-inspired fantasy series from GWYNNE. You start with The Shadow of the Gods. Boom, right there. Followed by The Hunger of the Gods. And on October 22nd, the final installment, The Fury of the Gods, will be released. And like, I'm lucky to get an advanced reader copy, but what I wanted to say was, if you're not at least intrigued by these covers, I highly doubt that this is for you, because these go crazy. In book 1, you follow 3 different characters in 3 different parts of the world. You've got a huntress on a quest, you've got a noblewoman searching to make a name for herself, and a thrall who is after revenge. I think everyone's favorite character is Orca, who is one of the best female main characters written by a man or otherwise in fantasy. And if you read it, you'll see why. Everybody loves her. Hail Orca. This takes place hundreds of years after all the gods of the world have fallen, but there are people who are descended from them and carry some of their qualities. So that's where some of the magic in this world comes into play. Now, so far, I have read through the first 2, and they both had fantastic endings. Although I will say it was a slight challenge getting through book 1 until the fireworks started going off, mainly because you're trying to piece the world together, figure out the difference between the Bloodsworn and the Battlegrim, but those clouds part pretty clearly by the end of The Shadow of the Gods. The real strength of these books lies in the action. Gwyn has clearly done his research, and on top of being incredibly knowledgeable on how combat works, he understands how to alter his writing in those stretches to give it a sense of velocity and urgency. And again, I was lucky enough to get an advanced copy of The Fury of the Gods, and I'm setting up an interview with Gwyn for hopefully sometime next week, which will air on this channel. So look forward to that if you think you might be interested in this series, because I'm really excited about it. To the surprise of no one, the first Law Trilogy in the 10-book First Law world by Joe Abercrombie is going to be on this list. You're going to realize that I talk a lot about Joe Abercrombie. He was on my first video on this channel talking about my favorite authors. He had 2 books on my 5-star books video. For those were books that I've read in 2024, the 5-star books I read in 2024. So I'll keep this brief, but I honestly can't do a list like this without at least mentioning him. Now, the initial First Law Trilogy consists of The Blade itself, Before They Are Hanged, and The Last Argument of Kings. And then you get the 3 standalones, a collection of short stories, and a bookend trilogy called The Age of Madness, which is incredible. But we'll keep this to the initial trilogy for now, even though the books just get better and better throughout this world. So in The Blade itself, the world is at war. The Union is fighting a war to the north with the Northmen and a war to the south with the Gurkish. And our characters are just trying to navigate these troubling times. My favorite character in this series is a fella named Glokta, Sandan Glokta. He's a torturer by trade that was tortured and crippled himself in a previous war with the Gurkish, and he's out to get answers by torture. Look, I didn't say that he was a good person. I simply said he's my favorite character, probably my favorite fantasy character of all time. His inner monologue lives in my head. He's so quotable. In fact, this whole series is, because lurking behind this layer of dark humor and bloodthirsty action, there are some incredibly quotable lines that stick with you for a long time. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned yet on this channel regarding this series is the audiobook narrator, the GOAT, Stephen Pacey. Abercrombie's words mixed with Pacey's voice and acting of these different characters is like peanut butter and jelly. It's an elite combination. So I immersion read this. And immersion reading is the reading of the physical copy while also listening along with the audiobook. So if you pick this series up, please do that. There is no better experience. Now, I promised a bonus, and here it is. The Forever Desert series by Moses Osi Atomi. These are short novellas that punch well above their weight. The vibes are kind of like The Spirit Cuts Through Water in a way, which that's one of my favorite books of all time. Book 1 is The Lies of the Ajungo. You follow a teenager who travels the desert in search of water to bring back to the city in order to save his mother. Book 2 is The Truth of the Aleke, and Book 3, The Memory of the Ogisi, is expected sometime around summer 2025. These are such a cool vibe, super solid reads. So that's 6 fantasy series that you could start today. I'll put all of these book ones in my storefront so you can check that out in my link tree, along with some deals on my Patreon and Audible. And remember to like and subscribe and have a beautiful rest of your day. I appreciate y'all.